The Great Unclean One is a big, gross, and beautiful miniature from Warhammer 40,000, an iconic centerpiece for the Nurgle faction. Normally I'm not too big on the Nurgle faction. I find them a bit too ugly for my liking. However, something about the bulbous look of the Great Unclean One, its big smile and chinny chin chin just make me happy. I'm also a sucker for big monsters, and big swords. He's perfect. It's a model that people have used for awesome conversions. And since it's spooky season, I thought I'd try my own. A big pumpkin unclean one, with a candle on the inside. Not quite an original idea, but I want my own and I thought I'd share my process.
I took my troubles down to Madame Ruth.
Now I could just build the Great Unclean One, paint the thing orange and call it a day. But I want to convert something. And the most simple but effective conversions could be just a head swap, which is all I gotta do. I have these resin pumpkins from Green Stuff World, all of which have big grins that I think could work great, especially this one. It's also just the right size for the Great Unclean One. This is coming along swimmingly, ain't it? Well, hold on now. This ain't no head swap like any other model. We gotta do a lot of surgery. Before we get to the head, there's a few things I had to consider before just building the whole model. Firstly, since I wasn't super sure how the interior lighting would work, I didn't want to seal it right away. So our boy is staying in half for now. To prep for the lighting later, I held this candle on the inside, while checking outside for any light leaks, which are very apparent with all these seams between the pieces. I made a great effort using super glue with accelerator and plastic cement to seal everything. I went all over the model to melt the plastic at each point light would bleed through. Now there's a few bits from the original head of the model that we need to steal. This lower chin from this headpiece, and the antlers. Cutting the antlers off is easy enough, but cutting out the chin is pretty tricky. Be slow and careful. Be very precise with your cuts so you don't chew up the piece too bad. Wanting to keep the same position with the antlers, I glued them onto the head in roughly the same place as the original head. I found the antlers have this triangular point on the inside, maybe a result of cutting them off. Whatever the case, it helps fit them snugly into the pumpkin. The pumpkin itself doesn't sit super well onto the neck of the model. This area would need to be sawed as well to make room for the head, also to make sculpting easier later. I gradually carved out plastic as I kept test fitting the head to see how it would fit, as well as checking from all angles that I liked the position. Before I glue the head on, I broke out the epoxy sculpt to blend the antlers to the head. I like epoxy sculpt more than green stuff, which I find is way too stiff, and more than milliput, which I think is too soft. When I'm happy with that, I glue it in place, then commence blending the head to the body. Typically one's gut reaction here might be to wrap a snake of putty around the neck and sculpt it that way, but I didn't want to do that. I didn't think I'd get it to be clean enough as there would be a lot of putty on the outside. So instead, I put chunks of putty from behind, pushing it in so the putty oozes into the gap. Then from the front, using sculpting tools and water, smoothed it out and blended it with the model. Side note, when I inevitably mix too much putty, I'll make a mound of it on top of some parchment paper so it doesn't stick, then I'll keep the mound for later use on a base.
Oh, fuck. Well.
Before closing up the body, I had to drill out the back of this mouth stomach. Make sure to do this to the piece before building anything. It'll be much easier. To put the lights in later, I'd need access to the inside. So I opted to magnetize them to the base. This would require some chonky magnets, 2 3x10mm magnets to be exact. This foot is perfectly hollow enough to house one set of magnets. Just put some putty to fill in the extra space. I had to carve out some of the other foot to make room for the other set of magnets. I'm carving a bit too much here. Make sure you don't go too far into the toes or the back of the foot, or you'll have to fill it in with putty like I did. With all of that done now, I could close this boy up. For the weapons, I knew I wanted to go with the formation on the box art, so I didn't bother magnetizing the other weapon options. Now behold, the instrument of your demise! This makes for the bulk of the conversion, now for the lighting and base. At first I really wasn't sure how to go about this. For the light source, I naturally thought of one of these flickering LED candles. Then I thought of puck lights, LED strings, a whole ass light lemon. I did all kinds of math trying to figure out how I might mount each option in here. Then I realized why. Why do that? Why do any of that? At first I was just going to fix him to the base normally. But this is a special boy, so I wanted to give him a special base with a fat amount of corkboard. also helped raise the chains. I found they scrape against the table otherwise. Now there's one thing I considered for this build that I ended up not going with. I've recently been reading the comic series Gunslinger Spawn. As I looked at this guy, I couldn't help but also think of the big, ugly, wide-grin creatures in the Spawn world, where there are also big guns. So I wanted to try to give him a big gun. I thought of it being attached to his back, or in his arm in some kind of malformed way, or have it hanging on his back by a chain. Despite me hacking up a lot of bits to make this gun, I ultimately decided to scrap this idea. For one, an idea like this should have been considered a while ago. It feels far too late now. Additionally, the gun just didn't feel right on the model contextually, or aesthetically. Something about it just clashed with the sort of fantasy Halloween narrative I had in mind for it. So I ditched the gun and moved on. Now for the base, I tried a bunch of bits. I went with this little tree trunk and these live pumpkins. I also decided I want to throw on water effects later, so I created some putty mounds to contain where I wanted the water to go. This also helped vary the topography of the base, instead of leaving it flat. On goes some mud texture paste with a healthy amount of skulls, cutting the backs of the skulls so they sit in the base better. I threw on some sand to help vary the texture of the soil as well. Off camera, after waiting for the mud to dry, I sealed in the sand with some superglue thin. And after painting the base, I would apply some miniature leaves. During this whole process, I made sure to place the model on the base every now and then to make sure it isn't standing on anything. With the base ready, all I had to do now was to figure out a way to attach the light in a non-permanent way. To do this, I decided a command strip would work best. I went on with priming the base first, then cut a single command strip in half. One half on the base, one half on the light. What also worked great about using a command strip meant that if I positioned the light incorrectly, I could just take it off the Velcro and try again until I got the right fit. From the front, seeing the candle as is works just fine, but I wanted to fuse the light somehow. I thought of how some people use cotton for light effects. Later on, after painting, I'd take a piece of AC filter and glued it on the inside of the stomach, which diffused the light beautifully. Then finally, after a weekend-long painting process, I had a completed Great Unclean Lantern guy. Here he is. I am thrilled to see this finished. It required a lot of different techniques and mental math to figure out when and where to put things. I feel much more confident in myself as a hobbyist after this project. Of course, that didn't come without some moments where I was second-guessing myself, especially while painting. But that's completely normal. When we try new things, we should expect new challenges. Specifically, actually physically planning out my color schemes, as in writing it down somewhere. It's nice to have everything in your head, but seeing it in front of you really helps you keep track. Also, and equally crucial, trusting myself. During the painting process, I had a lot of second guesses, even more so than while I was building. There were moments I was worried I wasn't skilled enough of a painter yet to tackle something like this. But what got me through it was trusting my gut feelings, and it ended up working out. The painting process for this model is a whole video on its own, so if you'd like to see that, let me know in the comments. I cannot wait to bring this guy out for my Warhammer Halloween campaign. My friends are going to love seeing him. Additionally, it never fails to surprise me how many materials it can take to finish one model, and how many more are considered. I think it's satisfying to look at, really. Well, that's all from me. I hope this stirred some creative juices for you. If you enjoyed this video, show some support down below. You know how. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Stay spooky.